I'm recording this video with permission from Scholastic. So welcome back, guys. I know this might look a little bit different. I'm wearing headphones so that you can hear me, and I'm wearing a hat because it's really sunny outside and I don't want to get burned. But it's a really pretty day here where I live, and so I decided to do our read aloud outside today. So last time we were here, we read chapter 13 of the Tale of Despereaux, and today we're going to be reading chapter 14. So I want you to refresh your memory a little bit, and remember that the author taught us at the end that Despereaux thought of two words at the end of when he was sent into the dungeon. He thought of the word perfidy, and he thought of the word pea. And so we learned that perfidy, this feeling of deceitfulness, is going to be an important theme throughout the book. And we also learned that he's thinking of P because Princess P, he's deciding not to renounce her and kind of not sure where this is going to go. Also, we learned that Furlough, Despereaux's brother, is actually one of the people who were throwing him in the dungeon, and so that's a really important thing to notice as well. Okay, hopefully this isn't cutting off my head too much. I don't have wireless headphones, but I want to be able to use the microphone here on my headphones, so that's why this little thing is connecting between you and me today. But this chapter is called Darkness. Despereaux lay on his back at the bottom of the steps and touched the bones in his body one by one. They were all there, and amazingly, they were unbroken. He got to his feet and became aware of the terrible, foul, extremely insulting smell. The dungeon, reader, stank. It stank of despair and suffering and hopelessness, which is to say that the dungeon smelled of rats. It was so dark. Despereaux had never before encountered darkness so awful, so all-encompassing. The darkness had a physical presence as if it were a being all its own. The mouse held one small paw up in front of his whiskers. He could not see it, and he had the truly alarming thought that perhaps he, Despereaux Tilling, did not even exist. "Oh my," he said out loud. His voice echoed in the smelly darkness. "Perfidy," said Despereaux, just to hear his voice again, just to assure himself that he did exist. "P," said Despereaux, and the name of his beloved was immediately swallowed up by the darkness. He shivered, he shook, he sneezed. His teeth chattered, he longed for his handkerchief. He grabbed hold of his tail. It took him a long, frightening moment to even locate his tail. So absolute was the darkness. To have something, anything to hold on to. He considered fainting. He deemed it the only reasonable response to the situation in which he found himself. But then he remembered the words of the threadmaster: honor, courtesy, devotion, and bravery. "I will be brave," thought Despereaux. "I will be brave like a knight in shining armor. I will be brave for the Princess P." How best for him to be brave? He cleared his throat, he let go of his tail, and he stood up straighter. "Once upon a time," he said out loud to the darkness. He said these words because they were the best, the most powerful words that he knew, and just saying them comforted him. "Once upon a time," he said again, feeling a tiny bit braver. "There was a knight, and he wore always an armor of shining silver." "Once upon a time?" boomed a voice in the dark. "A knight in shining armor? What does a mouse know of such things?" That voice, the loudest voice that Despereaux had ever heard, could only, he assumed, belong to the world's largest rat. Despereaux's small, overworked heart stopped beating, and for the second time that day, the mouse fainted. So that was a really short and sweet chapter, so I think I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 15 as well, because sometimes if the chapters are really short, I'll combine them. But basically, this chapter covered Despereaux discovering what was in the dungeon. It seemed dark. He thought he'd die. Maybe he didn't even think he existed. And then at the very end, we learned that there's this loud, booming voice that he believes belongs to the largest rat possible. So that's where we're leaving off. I don't want to talk too much because I wanted to see what happens. So stay with me. Okay, guys, I moved the camera angle a little bit. I'm actually sitting at SPU, the university that I go at. I live really close to here, so nobody's out here, so I'm just kind of sitting and reading to you guys. But hopefully this lighting is better so you can actually see my face. It gets a little tricky when you're reading outside, but hopefully you guys can hear me, and we're going to be reading chapter 15 of the Tale of Despereaux. So we're going to continue and just read 2 chapters today, so stick with me. When Despereaux awoke, he was cupped in the large, callous hand of a human, and he was staring into the fire of one match, and beyond the match there was a large, dark eye looking directly at him. "A mouse with red thread," boomed the voice. "Ah, yes, Gregory knows the way of mice and rats. Gregory knows. And Gregory has his own thread. marking him. See here, Mouse? And the match was held to the candle, and the candle sputtered to life, and Despereaux saw that there was a rope tied around the man's ankle. Here is the difference between us. Gregory's rope saves him, and your thread will be the death of you. The man blew the candle out, and the darkness descended, and the man's hand closed more tightly around Despereaux, and Despereaux felt his beleaguered heart start up a crazy rhythm of fear. "Who are you?" he whispered. "The answer to that question, Mouse, is Gregory. You are talking to Gregory the jailer, who has been buried here, keeping watch over this dungeon for decades, for centuries, for eons, for eternities. You are talking to Gregory the jailer, who, in the richest of ironies, is nothing but a prisoner here himself." "Oh," said Despereaux. May I get down, Gregory?" "The mouse wants to know if Gregory the jailer will let him go. Listen to Gregory, Mouse. You do not want to be let go. Here in this dungeon, you are in the treacherous dark heart of the world, and if Gregory was to release you, the twistings and turnings and dead ends and false doorways of this place would swallow you for all eternity. Only Gregory and the rats can find their way through this maze. The rats because they know, because the way of it mirrors their own dark hearts, and Gregory because this rope is forever tied to his ankle to guide him back to the beginning. Gregory would let you go, but you would only beg him to take you back up again. The rats are coming for you, you see." "They are?" "Listen," said Gregory. "You can hear their tails dragging through the muck and filth. You can hear them filing their nails and teeth. They are coming for you. They are coming to take you apart piece by piece." Despereaux listened, and he was quite certain that he heard nails and teeth of the rats, the sound of sharp things being made sharper still. "They will strip all the fur from your flesh and all the flesh from your bones, and when they are done with you, there will be nothing except red thread. Red thread and bones. Gregory has seen it many times, the tragic end of a mouse." "But I need to live," said Despereaux. "I can't die." "You cannot die? Ah, that is lovely. He says he cannot die." Gregory closed his hand more tightly around Despereaux. "And why would that be, Mouse? Why is it that you cannot die?" "Because I'm in love. I love somebody, and it is my duty to serve her." "Love," said Gregory. "Love. Hark you. I will show you the twisted results of love." Another match was struck. The candle was lit again, and Gregory held it up so that the flame illuminated a massive, towering, teetering pile of spoons and kettles and soup bowls. "Look on that," said Gregory. "That is a monument of the foolishness of love." "What is it?" asked Despereaux. He stared at the great tower that reached up, up, up into the blackness. "What it looks like. Spoons, bowls, kettles, all of them gathered here as hard evidence in the pain of loving a living thing. The king loved the queen, and the queen died. This monstrosity, the junk heap, is the result of love." "I don't understand," said Despereaux. "And you will not understand until you lose what you love. But enough about love," said Gregory. He blew out the candle. "We will talk instead about your life, and how Gregory will save it, if you so desire." "Why would you save me?" Despereaux asked. "Have you saved any other mice?" "Never," said Gregory. "Not one." "Why would you save me, then?" "Because you, Mouse, can tell Gregory a story. Stories are light. Light is precious in a world so dark. Begin at the beginning. Tell Gregory a story. Make some light." And because Despereaux wanted very much to live, he said, "Well, once upon a time." "Yes," Gregory said happily. He raised his finger higher and then higher, still until Despereaux's whiskers brushed against his leathery, time-worn ear. "Go on, Mouse," said Gregory. "Tell Gregory a story." Here's a picture of Gregory. He looks pretty scary, doesn't he? So Gregory is kind of just using Despereaux to get entertainment because he's basically stuck in this dungeon by himself, and kind of waiting for Despereaux to tell him a story as Despereaux's like in his hand. So kind of creepy. And it was in this way that Despereaux became the only mouse sent to the dungeon whom the rats did not reduce to a pile of bones and a piece of red thread. It was in this way that Despereaux was saved. Reader, if you don't mind, that is where we shall leave our small mouse for now, in the dark of the dungeon, in the hand of the old jailer, telling a story to save himself. It is time for us to turn our attention elsewhere. Time for us, reader, to speak of rats. and of one rat in particular. And then it says, end of the first book. So I think we talked about at the beginning of when we started reading this, that this book, Tale of Despereaux, is kind of divided into certain little like mini sections. And so when it says the end of the first book, we still got a ways to go, but this is like the end of the first section. And so I want you to stop and think, is this what you thought was going to happen? Because this is not what I like would have pictured originally. We know that Despereaux was going to get thrown into the dungeon, but I assumed that he would encounter a big rat, and he didn't. He encountered the jailer, which is this guy who is a prisoner himself, who's kind of using Despereaux to get entertainment, and in turn, Despereaux didn't die. He wasn't thrown to the rats immediately. And so I like, again, how this author decides to say, reader, we're going to stop here for a while, and it looks like maybe in the second or the next book that we're going to read, the next section of the book, the author said that we were going to be maybe focusing more on a rat. Let's see, what did it say again? It's time to turn our attention elsewhere. Time for us to, reader, to speak of rats, and of one rat in particular. And so I think the story might be shifting to maybe a different perspective. I want you to make a prediction. I'm not going to look ahead. I'm not going to cheat either. I'm just going to read it with you guys and see what happens. But thanks so much for joining me today, guys. I hope this inspires you to maybe get outside. Some days are sunny and some days are rainy, but when it is sunny, try to get outside and enjoy it. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.